Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Furious 7 in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is called Furious 7. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it all. Interesting facts about this movie. In today's video, I'm going to tell you, I'm also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film storyline, star cast, actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you, friends, to watch this video till the end, so let's start the video. Furious 7, also known as Fast and Furious 7, is a 2015 action film directed by James Wan and written by Chris Morgan. It is the sequel to Fast and Furious 6, 2013, and the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, 2006, and the seventh installment in the Fast and Furious franchise. The film stars an ensemble cast including Vin Diesel, Paul Walker in his final film role, Dwayne Johnson, Michelle Rodriguez, Tyrese Gibson, Chris Ludacris Bridges, Jordana Brewster, Jaimin Hounsou, Kurt Russell, and Jason Statham. In the film, Dominic Toretto, Brian O'Connor, and their team are recruited by covert ops leader Mr. Nobody to prevent Mos Jakandi, a terrorist, from obtaining a hacking program, but Deckard Shaw, a former Special Forces soldier seeking to avenge his comatose young brother Owen Shaw, puts the team in danger. Plans for a seventh installment were first announced in February 2012, when Johnson stated that production on the film would begin after the completion of Fast and Furious 6. In April 2013, Wan, predominantly known for horror films, was announced to direct the film. Casting showed the returns of Diesel and Walker that same month. Principal photography began that September in Atlanta, but was indefinitely suspended in November after Walker died in a car crash. Filming resumed in April 2014 and ended in July, with Walker's brothers Caleb and Cody standing in to complete his remaining scenes, causing delay to its 2015 release date, with other filming locations including Los Angeles, Colorado, Abu Dhabi, and Tokyo. Brian Tyler, who had composed the score for Fast 5 2011, returned to compose the seventh installment. With an estimated production budget of up to $250 million, it is one of the most expensive films ever made. Furious 7 premiered at the TCL Chinese Theater in Los Angeles on April 1, 2015, and was released in the United States on April 3 by Universal Pictures. The film was a box office success, and it received positive reviews from critics for its action sequences and emotional weight, particularly its emotional tribute to Walker, with many considering it to be one of the best films in the franchise. It grossed over $1.5 billion worldwide, making it the third highest grossing film of 2015 and the fourth highest grossing film of all time at the time of release. It also set a record for the second highest opening weekend of its time, grossing $397.6 million worldwide. It was the highest-grossing film of 2015 internationally and became the highest-grossing film of the franchise in the first 12 days of its theatrical release. A sequel titled The Fate of the Furious was released in 2017. Plot: after defeating Owen Shaw and securing pardons for their past crimes, Dominic Toretto, Brian O'Connor, and the team have returned to U.S. to live normal lives. Dom tries to help Letty Ortiz regain her memory, while Brian accustoms himself to life as a father. Meanwhile, Owen's elder brother Deckard Shaw breaks into the hospital, where the comatose Owen is held in London and vows to exact revenge. Deckard breaks into the DSS field office in LA to extract profiles of Dom's crew and fights Luke Hobbs before he escapes, detonating a bomb that severely injures Hobbs. Dom learns from his sister Mia that she is pregnant again and convinces her to tell Brian. However, a letter bomb sent by Deckard, who has apparently killed Han Lu in Tokyo, explodes and destroys the Toretto house. Dom meets Hobbs and learns about Deckard before he travels to Tokyo to retrieve Han's body and acquires the objects found at the crash site from Sean Boswell. As Dom, Brian, Tej Parker, and Roman Pierce mourn Han and Giselle Yashar at Han's funeral in L.A., Dom spots Deckard spying on them and confronts him in an underground tunnel, but Deckard flees when a covert ops team, led by government agent Mr. Nobody, arrives. Mr. Nobody tells Dom that he will help them in stopping Deckard if he helps him retrieve God's Eye, a computer program capable of tracking a specific individual using anything on a digital network, and save its creator Ramsey from Mose Jakande, a Nigerian terrorist. The team airdrops their off-road modified cars over the Caucasus Mountains in Azerbaijan and ambush Jakande's convoy, where they rescue Ramsey and leave for the Etihad Towers in Abu Dhabi. They steal the flash drive containing the God's Eye chip from a billionaire hidden in a Lycan hypersport. With God's Eye secure, Dom, Brian, Nobody, and his team use it to hunt Deckard to an abandoned factory, but are ambushed by Jakande and his henchmen, who have allied with Deckard, and are forced to flee while Jakande obtains God's Eye. Mr. Nobody is medically extracted while the team returns to L.A. Dom plans to fight Deckard alone, while Letty, Brian, Tej, and Roman resolve to protect Ramsey from Jakande. Brian promises Mia that he will fully dedicate himself to their family after he defeats Deckard and Jakande. As Jakande pursues Brian and the rest of the team with a stealth helicopter and an aerial drone, Ramsey attempts to hack into God's Eye. Discovering the situation, Hobbs leaves the hospital and destroys the drone with an ambulance. After battling and killing Jakande's henchman Kiet, Brian hijacks a signal repeater tower that allows Ramsey to control God's Eye and shut it down. As the military closes into the city, Jakande attempts to flee and spots Dom and Deckard engaging in a brawl atop a public parking garage. Intervening, Jakande turns on Deckard and attacks both men. Dom uses the distraction to defeat Deckard by causing part of the parking garage to collapse beneath him. Dom attempts to crash his Dodge Charger onto Jakande's helicopter, where he leaves a bag of grenades on the helicopter and crashes on the rubble of the garage. Hobbs shoots the grenades, destroying the helicopter and killing Jakande. After Brian and Hobbs help Letty bring out Dom's unconscious body, Letty cradles Dom and tells him that she has fully regained her memories and has remembered their wedding. Dom regains consciousness. Deckard is arrested by Hobbs and CIA, where he is locked up in a black site prison. The rest of the team relaxes on a tropical beach. Brian and Mia play with their son Jack, while Dom, Letty, Roman, Tej, and Ramsey look on, acknowledging that Brian is happily retired with his family. Dom drives away and Brian catches up with him. As Dom recalls his memories with Brian, they bid each other farewell and drive off in separate directions. Cast main articles, list of Fast and Furious cast members, and list of Fast and Furious characters. Vin Diesel as Dominic Toretto, a former criminal, professional street racer, and millionaire who has retired and settled down with his wife, Letty. Paul Walker as Brian O'Connor, a former LAPD police officer and FBI agent turned criminal who has retired and settled down with his wife, Mia, and their son, Jack. This was Walker's final Fast and Furious film, as well as his final film appearance. Caleb and Cody Walker, Paul's younger brothers, were used as stand-ins to complete his remaining scenes following their brother's death. Dwayne Johnson as Luke Hobbs, a DSS agent who allied with Dom and his team after their outings in Rio de Janeiro in Europe. Johnson initially said that if Universal Pictures pursued the accelerated development of a seventh film beginning in the summer, he would be unable to participate due to scheduling conflicts with filming on Hercules 2014. However, as production for Furious 7 would commence in September, Johnson confirmed his return, for Hercules would complete production in time to enable him to shoot the film. Michelle Rodriguez as Letty Ortiz Toretto, Dom's wife and a professional street racer who was revealed to have suffered from amnesia after being presumed dead in Fast and Furious 2009. Tyrese Gibson as Roman Pierce, a former criminal and childhood friend of Brian from Barstow and a member of Dom's team. Chris Ludacris Bridges as Tej Parker, a mechanic from Miami and a member of Dom's team. Jordana Brewster as Mia Toretto, Dom's sister and a former member of his team who has settled down with her husband Brian and their son Jack. Jimon Hansu as Mose Jakande, a Nigerian-born mercenary and terrorist who leads a private military company that allies with Shaw and uses God's Eye to track its creator, and uses her to track down his enemies. Tony Jaa as Kiet, a member of Jacande's team who possesses great agility, athleticism, and fighting prowess. Thai martial arts actor Ja was confirmed to have joined the cast in August 2013, making his Hollywood debut. Ronda Rousey as Kara, the head of security for an Abu Dhabi billionaire. Rousey's involvement was confirmed in August 2013. Having committed to The Expendables 3, 2014 at the same time, Rousey was forced to shoot both films back-to-back in order to allow herself 45 days to focus on training for her UFC championship rematch against Miesha Tate. Her participation in the film was similar to that of Gina Carano, making the transition from mixed martial arts fighting to acting, following Carano's involvement in Fast and Furious 6, 2013. Nathalie Emmanuel as Ramsey, a British computer hacktivist and the creator of The God's Eye, who allies with Dom and his team after being saved from Jacandi and helps them to regain control of her program. Kurt Russell as Mr. Nobody, the leader of a covert ops team who agrees to help Dom stop Shaw if he can help him prevent Jacandi from obtaining a computer program called The God's Eye. Jason Statham as Deckard Shaw, a former Special Forces soldier and intelligence agent who seeks to avenge his comatose younger brother after his hospitalization at the hands of Dom and his team in Spain. John Brotherton portrays Shepard, Mr. Nobody's right-hand man. Sung Kang and Gal Gadot appear in archive footage as Han Lu and Giselle Yashar. Lucas Black reprises his role as Sean Boswell, an American street racer who lives in Tokyo, whom Dom meets when he travels to Tokyo to claim the body of Han, a mutual friend of theirs killed by Shaw. In September, it was confirmed that Black had signed on to reprise his role as Boswell for Furious 7 and 2 more installments. Elsa Pataky reprises her role as Elena Neves, a DSS agent and former Rio police officer who moved to the United States to become Hobbs' new partner at the DSS. Luke Evans briefly reprises his role as Owen Shaw, Deckard's now comatose younger brother, from Fast and Furious 6, 2013, and Noel Guglielmi reprises his role as Hector for a cameo appearance from The Fast and the Furious, 2001. Ali Fazal portrays Safar, a friend of Ramsey to whom she sent the God's Eye for safekeeping. Fazal described his role as a cameo, 16. Australian rapper Iggy Azalea, who also appears on the soundtrack, makes a cameo appearance as a racer at Race Wars. American singer-rapper T-Pain appears as himself as he DJs a party in Abu Dhabi. Romeo Santos makes a cameo appearance as Mando, who shelters Mia in the Dominican Republic, and Clement Tenage appears as one of the Race Wars racers. Production development. On October 21, 2011, the Los Angeles Times reported that Universal Studios was considering filming 2 sequels, Fast 6 and Fast 7, back-to-back with a single storyline running through both films. Both would be written by Chris Morgan and directed by Justin Lin, who had been the franchise's writer and director, respectively, since The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, 2006. On December 20, 2011, following the release of Fast 5, 2011, Vin Diesel stated that Fast 6 would be split into 2 parts, with writing for the 2 films occurring simultaneously. On the decision, Diesel said, "We have to pay off this story. We have to service all of these character relationships. And when we started mapping all that out, it just went beyond 110 pages. The studio said, you can't fit all that story in one damn movie." However, in an interview on February 15, 2012, Dwayne Johnson stated that the 2 intended sequels would no longer be filmed simultaneously because of weather issues in filming locations, and that production on Fast 7 would only begin after the completion of Fast 6. In April 2013, during the post-production of the retitled Fast and Furious 6, Lin announced that he would not return to direct the 7th film, as the studio wanted to produce the film on an accelerated scheduled for release in summer 2014. This would have required Lin to begin pre-production on the sequel while performing post-production on Fast and Furious 6, which he considered would affect the quality of the final product. Despite the usual 2-year gap between the previous installments, Universal chose to pursue a sequel quicker due to having fewer reliable franchises than its competitor studios. However, subsequent interviews with Lin have suggested that the 6th film was always intended to be the final installment under his direction. In April 2013, Australian director James Wan, predominantly known for horror films, was announced as the sequel's director, with Neal H. Moritz and Michael Fottrell returning to produce and Morgan returning to write the script, his fifth in the franchise. On April 16, 2013, Diesel announced that the sequel would be released on July 11, 2014. In May 2013, Diesel said that the sequel would feature Los Angeles, Tokyo, and the Middle East as locations. Filming principal photography began in early September 2013 in Atlanta, with a casting call issued. Abu Dhabi was also a filming location. The production crew chose it over Dubai, as they would benefit from the Emirates' 30% rebate scheme. Pikes Peak Highway in Colorado was closed in September to film some driving sequences. On September 16th, the production filmed with Paul Walker and the Kimsey twins, playing his son, Jack, in front of an Atlanta elementary school. Han's funeral scene was filmed at Oakland Cemetery, with extras needed for the scene being hot, hip, and trendy cool types of all ethnicities between the ages of 18 and 45. On the evening of September 19th, Lucas Black joined the production for his sole scene with Diesel in an Atlanta parking garage. Separate scenes with Walker also shot in the same location on the same night, including one half of a phone conversation between his character and Jordana Brewster's. On October 24th, over a month into the film's production, Johnson tweeted he had started shooting for the film after wrapping up on Hercules. 5 days later, Diesel posted the first photo of Johnson on the set, in the hospital scene. Death of Paul Walker. On November 30th, Walker, who portrayed Brian O'Connor, died in a single-vehicle accident. The next day, Universal announced that producti. On December 4th, Universal put production on hold indefinitely. Wan later confirmed that the film had not been canceled. On December 22nd, Diesel announced that the film would be released on April 10, 2015. On February 27, 2014, The Hollywood Reporter reported that filming would resume on April 1st, and that the cast and crew had headed to Atlanta to prepare for about 8 more weeks of shooting. Principal photography ended on July 10th. The scene featuring Brian jumping off a bus off a cliff was performed by a stuntman and was all done without any computer graphics. The shooting for this particular sequence, along with the scene in which Dom and his team are pursuing to rescue Ramsey, almost did not happen due to the absence of tax break in Colorado. The studio originally wanted to shoot the sequence in Georgia, which provides tax breaks for film productions, and then add woods in the background later in post-production, to which Razatos denied, saying, "The audience is going to know it's CGI and aren't going to feel good about it." Shooting finally took place in Colorado. A total of 340 cars were used in the film, and more than 230 cars were destroyed in the making of the film, including several black Mercedes-Benzes, a Ford Crown Victoria, and a Mitsubishi Montero. The film featured the on-screen destruction of a Lykan Hypersport by W Motors, valued at $3.4 million, though the actual car destroyed was a less expensive model made for the film rather than one of the 7 actual production Hypersports. The mountain highway chase scene on Colorado's Monarch Pass proved to be the most damaging sequence, with over 40 vehicles being destroyed. Only 10% of the action sequences in the film were computer-generated, and even then, much of the CGI was employed simply to erase the wires and other contraptions that were used to film real cars and drivers or to add a background. It took more than 3,500 man-days to complete the various stunts of the film. Redevelopment of Walker's character. In January 2014, Time reported that Walker's character, Brian O'Connor, would be retired instead of killed, and that new scenes would be developed in order to allow the franchise to continue without him. To recreate Walker's likeness, the filmmakers hired Peter Jackson's Weta Digital visual effects house, which had previously produced the imagery of Gollum in the Lord of the Rings franchise and Caesar in the Planet of the Apes franchise. Initially, what Weta could do was severely constrained by the quality of the reference materials available for Walker's physical appearance. In April 2014, it was reported that Walker's brothers Caleb and Cody had been hired as stand-ins. Their strong resemblance to their late brother meant the filmmakers could use scans of their bodies instead of recreating Walker's entire body from scratch. The final film showed Walker's face superimposed over the bodies of his brothers or actor John Brotherton in 350 visual effects shots. 260 used a computer-generated face, while 90 repurposed actual footage of Walker's face borrowed from outtakes or older footage. Music. Main article, Furious 7 soundtrack. The musical score was composed by Brian Tyler, who scored the third, fourth, and fifth installments of the series. There's an emotional component to Fast and Furious 7 that is unique, said Tyler about his experience scoring. I think people are really going to be amazed by it. A soundtrack album to the film was released by Atlantic Records on March 17, 2015, while Tyler's score was released by Backlot Music on March 31st. When discussing the creation of the score, Tyler explained, "It was a pleasure to collaborate with James Wan on Furious 7, as he wanted the emotion of the themes to be the primary focus. The music uses modern recording techniques, vintage modular synthesizers, mashed-up beats, drums, and tweaked remix elements along with classic film scoring traditions including full orchestra, piano, voice, and classical guitar. I am so proud of the movie, and I dedicate the score to the memory of Paul Walker and all the joy he brought." In describing Tyler's score, Wan remarked, "Brian's amazing score gave this movie life. He did an incredible job of crafting an electrifying score for the bombastic action moments, one that is balanced by the beautiful and emotional themes of the characters that underline the heart of this movie." Songs featured in the film include Go Hard or Go Home, Wiz Khalifa and Iggy Azalea, Ride Out, Kid Ink, Tyga, Whale, YG and Rich Homie Quan, See You Again, Wiz Khalifa featuring Charlie Puth, My Angel, Prince Royce, Hamdalillah, Narcy featuring Shadia Mansour, Get Low, Dylan Francis and DJ Snake, A Vamos, J Balvin featuring Nicky Jam and French Montana, Tempest, Deftones, Mineo, Fido Blanco, and Payback, Juicy J, Kevin Gates, Future and Sage the Gemini. Wiz Khalifa and Charlie Puth's See You Again, which plays over the film's ending, and itself a tribute to Paul Walker, received both popular and critical acclaim. It was shortlisted for the Song of the Year for the BBC Music Awards, and was nominated for Best Original Song at the 73rd Golden Globe Awards. See You Again was the best-selling song of 2015 worldwide, with combined sales and track equivalent streams of 20.9 million units, according to IFPI. Theatrical. The film originally scheduled to be released on July 11, 2014, but the film was put on hold following Paul Walker's death in November 2013, 46. In October 2014, Universal wrote the film was officially titled Furious 7. Leading up to the event, 7-second behind-the-scenes videos were released, titled 7 Seconds of 7. The film was next scheduled for release on April 10, 2015, but it was announced that the film's release date had been brought forward a week to April 3rd. The official announcement and change of date was made in July 2014. Furious 7 premiered at the SXSW Film Festival at 12:07 a.m. at Austin's Paramount Theater on March 16, 2015. For its global premiere at the TCL Chinese Theater in Los Angeles on April 1st, IMAX Corporation installed a new laser projection, which was the first such installation in the U.S. and the second worldwide, following The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies 2014, which opened at Scotiabank Theatre in Toronto in December 2014. Home media. Furious 7 was released on July 6, 2015 in the UK and was released via DVD and Blu-ray on September 15 in other countries. The Blu-ray edition features an all-new extended edition of 140 minutes long, deleted scenes, stunts, behind the scenes, and the music video for Wiz Khalifa and Charlie Puth's See You Again. The Blu-ray and DVD versions include behind-the-scenes footage of the Race Wars scene, including rapper Iggy Azalea, and the making of the cars featured in the film. In the US and Canada, it sold roughly 2.5 million units on Blu-ray and DVD in its first week of release, making it the highest-selling home entertainment live-action film of 2015. This record was later surpassed by Jurassic World 2015 the following month. Furious 7's home video sales made a revenue of $66.4 million with 4.2 million copies sold, making it the seventh best-selling title of 2015. Reception. Box office. Furious 7 grossed $353 million in the United States and Canada and $1.163 billion in other countries for a worldwide total of $1.516 billion against a production budget of $250 million. It was the third highest grossing film of 2015 and the fourth highest grossing film of all time. Furious 7 was also the fastest film to reach the $1 billion mark at the time, doing so in 17 days. It also became the first film to pass $1 million in 4DX admissions worldwide. Deadline Hollywood calculated the film's net profit as $354 million, accounting for production budgets, marketing, talent participations, and other costs. Box office grosses and home media revenues placed it fifth on their list of most valuable blockbusters. Worldwide, Furious 7 was released across 810 IMAX theaters, which was the largest worldwide rollout in IMAX's history. Its worldwide opening of $397.6 million was the second highest opening of all time. The film had an IMAX opening weekend total of $20.8 million. Predictions for the opening weekend of Furious 7 in the United States and Canada were continuously revised upwards, starting from $115 million to $150 million. It opened on Friday, April 3, 2015, across 4,004 theaters, including 365 IMAX theaters, which made it the widest opening for the Fast and Furious film and Universal's widest opening release ever, until first surpassed by Jurassic World and Minions, and earned $67.4 million, marking the 10th biggest opening day. The film's Friday gross included a $15.8 million late-night run, which began at 7 p.m., from 3,069 theaters, marking Universal's highest late-night run, of which $2.2 million came from IMAX showings, marking the third largest IMAX preview gross ever. Based on pure Friday gross with the omission of revenues from Thursday shows, it earned $51.5 million, marking the fifth biggest of all time. Through Sunday, April 5th, it had an opening weekend total of $147.1 million. This opening broke the records for the highest weekend debuts in April and for the Easter weekend, both of which were later overtaken by Avengers, Infinity War, and Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, respectively. It earned an IMAX opening weekend total of $13.3 million, marking the second biggest of all time for a 2D movie. Premium large format comprised 8%, $11.5 million, of the total opening gross from 400 PLF screens, which is the biggest 2D PLF opening. In its second weekend, the film expanded to 4,022 theaters, thereby breaking its own record of being the widest Universal Pictures release ever, and earned an estimated $59.6 million, declining by 60%, which is the third best second weekend holdover for a pre-summer film release. It became the highest-grossing film in the Fast and Furious franchise, doing so only in 10 days. The previous record, which was held by Fast and Furious 6, took 15 weeks to reach its entire lifetime gross of $238.67 million. It also set the record for the biggest second weekend April gross. Furious 7 opened on April 1, 2015, in 12 countries, earning $16.9 million, including previews from 22 countries. It opened in 33 more countries on April 2nd, for a total of 45 countries, earning $43 million from 8,407 screens, marking Universal Pictures' overseas highest-grossing Thursday ever, and for a two-day total of $60 million, 118. It added 20 more countries on April 3rd, earning $59.2 million from 9,935 screens in 63 countries, for a three-day total of $120.6 million. On April 5th, it earned a four-day opening weekend total of $250.4 million from 10,683 screens in 64 countries, which is the fourth highest international opening ever, in all which it reached first place at the box office. It earned an IMAX opening weekend total of $7.5 million from 175 IMAX screens, breaking the record for the biggest April IMAX gross, previously held by Captain America: The Winter Soldier, 2014, $6.43 million. 96. It set opening weekend records in 29 countries, including Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Egypt, Malaysia, Mexico, Middle East, Romania, Taiwan, Thailand, Venezuela, and Vietnam. In its second weekend, it held the top spot and fell gradually by 20.4% to $198.7 million, including China's opening day gross, from 18,374 screens in 66 territories as a result of minor competition, and remaining at number 1 in all 63 territories where it was released the previous week. It added 3 new countries in its second weekend: China, Russia, and Poland. The film earned $167.9 million in its third weekend, which topped the box office outside of North America for 3 consecutive weekends. The film was a massive box office hit in China. It opened there on April 12th and set an all-time midnight run record with $8.5 million and an opening day record with $68.8 million. Its opening day included a record-breaking $5 million from IMAX run, also breaking Transformers: Age of Extinction's 2014 former record of $3.4 million. Through its opening week, April 12 to 19, it earned $245.9 million. Or the weekend alone, it took in $88.7 million from 5,454 screens Friday to Sunday and $182.4 million Monday to Sunday at the Chinese box office. It grossed CNY $1 billion in 5 days, the fastest time in which that has been achieved, and soon became the highest-grossing foreign film ever in China. In 15 days, its gross in China surpassed those in Canada and the United States and became the first film in China to make more than 2 billion renminbi. Its success has been credited to China Film Group Corporation, the state-owned film distributor, which had invested considerably in the film, reportedly taking a 10% stake. In Latin America, it became the second highest-grossing film, $200 million. The first time Universal has reached the milestone, and the second film in history to earn more than $200 million after The Avengers, 2012. In total earnings, the largest countries outside the US and Canada are China, $391.2 million, the United Kingdom, $60 million, Mexico, $51.7 million, Brazil, $46.6 million, Germany, $42.8 million, and India, $24 million. It grossed a total of $39 million in IMAX ticket sales in China, the biggest ever in the market. Critical response: Furious 7 received positive reviews from critics for its poignant tribute to Walker. The review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes reported an approval rating of 81%, with an average score of 7.70/10. Based on 281 reviews, the highest-rated film in the franchise to date. The website's critical consensus reads, "Serving up a fresh round of over-the-top thrills while adding unexpected dramatic heft, Furious 7 keeps the franchise moving in more ways than one." Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 67 out of 100 based on 50 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A on an A+ to F scale. The film received highly positive reviews upon its secret screening at the South by Southwest Film Festival on March 16, 2015. Ramin Setoodeh of Variety noted that fans began lining up outside 4 hours before the film was scheduled to start. The film closed with a tribute to Walker, which left many in the theater holding back tears. Wesley Morris wrote, "Who would have thought that a series addicted to the high of movement could also summon a solemnity that leaves you moved?" A.O. Scott of the New York Times said, "Furious 7 extends its predecessor's inclusive, stereotype-resistant ethic. Compared to almost any other large-scale big studio enterprise, the Furious brand practices a slick, no-big-deal multiculturalism and nods to both feminism and domestic traditionalism." John DeFore of The Hollywood Reporter criticized the film, however, describing it as stupidly diverting, saying the running time was overinflated. He compared watching the film to a morbid game, in addition to criticizing the screenplay. Movie review? Have you ever waited so long for something and finally get it and feel so satisfied and fulfilled? Well, that is me right now. If you had asked me a couple of months back, I would probably have said I wasn't sure April 3rd, 2015 was ever going to come. But it did, and it was definitely worth the wait. I am not the only person who was looking forward to this movie, which was originally supposed to have been released sometime in June 2014. But almost got shut down after the unexpected demise of Paul Walker. It would suffice to say that this could probably be the most looked-forward-to movie for this year, considering that people all over the world interested in this franchise certainly wanted to see how this last ride was going to be. Fast and Furious 7 follows the story of Fast and Furious 6, but details events that happen after. The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, the third installment in the franchise. I know this can get a bit confusing, but anyone who is very familiar with the F&F franchise would certainly get it. This movie sees the big brother of Owen Shaw from the last movie coming for vengeance against Toretto and his family. Jason Statham, the transporter, plays the big bad brother. I honestly think no other actor that comes to mind could have played this role much better. Jason is usually cast as a hero or good guy in most movies, but this time he plays the most badass villain I have ever come across. Whoever made this casting decision needs to be given all of the props. Do you remember seeing any movie and actually started to like the bad guy? This is it. You get to see the same very intense Jason Statham you are familiar with in this movie, except this time around committed to killing anyone associated to his brother's death. Dude was just too badass to not to appreciate. You still get to see the familiar lead roles from the previous movie, of course, except Sung Kang and Gal Gadot, whose characters died off in the last movie. Kurt Russell and Jaimon Hounsou both delivered in their roles. Obviously, the most commendable thing about this movie would have to be how they managed to complete it without lead, Paul Walker. Apparently, with the help of his brothers, stunt body doubles, and CGI, it is almost unnoticeable that he wasn't alive till the completion of the movie. Personally, I paid very close attention, hoping to spot a single scene in which I could clearly identify that Paul himself wasn't that character, but I couldn't. Everything was spot on, and it was almost as if he played out all his scenes before his tragic death. This clearly shows how much effort was put into this movie. They did turn the heat all the way up this time, double the action and the intensity of the last movie. Too many crazy and daring stunts not to leave anyone not impressed after seeing this movie. Yes, all the pre-release trailers, promos, and featurettes intended to whet your appetites did underpromise. This movie packs more action than all the others in the franchise combined, if you ask me. And the fight scenes are just too epic. The camera angles make it all more appreciable. Even Christopher Bridges, Ludacris, has a fight scene that would shock you. I feel the producers were very much keen on living everyone shell-shocked with the action sequences in this movie. I say this because some of the stunts to me seemed too over-exaggerated and very impossible. Although not necessarily a bad thing, I wasn't quite fooled enough by some of the stunts. I have always found over-exaggerated stunts not appealing. They kind of offset the good vibe the movie might be giving for a moment or two. Well, a little exaggeration isn't bad as long as it leaves the viewer in awe, but when it goes too much over the top, it starts to become questionable, and then not entertaining. I also noticed some continuity flaws in how they tried to merge the last movie with the third installment, which felt a bit off for me. That too doesn't matter. Who cares anyway? You can't miss the underlying themes of virtue of family, love, and honor. All these make it almost impossible not to love every single bit of this movie. Fast and Furious 7 certainly is the ultimate tribute to Paul Walker. Some of the scenes just make you want to cry. Not that they were depressingly sad. They just remind you of the beauty of life and the value of having good people around. I had my own ideas of how they would bid farewell to Paul, but I was not only left surprised that none of my ideas were right, but I was left very emotional. I had my moments, I won't lie. Furious 7 is a glorious overcompensation, a film so concerned about its rampant machismo that the casual viewer might miss how it Tokyo drifts atop soap opera bubbles. Like Lee Daniels' hit TV drama Empire, Furious 7 is stuffed with situations that require go-for-broke absurdity. But even Daniels and his nighttime soap predecessor Aaron Spelling would pause before attempting the level of "get the f*** out of here" style shenanigans director James Wan and writer Chris Morgan employ. Standing atop this installment of the series is its own Cookie Lion, Dominic Toretto, Vin Diesel. Like Cookie, played by Taraji P. Henson on Empire, Toretto will protect those he loves at any cost. He spends the entire film seeking revenge. Those unfamiliar with the franchise will be left to their own devices as to why. There's no last time on the Fast and the Furious recap to get you up to speed, and one shouldn't expect it from a movie with 7 in its title. Viewers of Fast and Furious 6 will know that the Tokyo-set demise of Han Sung-kang, one of the main characters, sets this new installment's plot in motion. After a package mailed from Tokyo nearly blows Toretto and his comrade-in-arms Brian, Paul Walker, to smithereens, Toretto senses a connection and is immediately out for blood. The bomb and Han's death are courtesy of Deckard Shaw, Jason Statham, an Englishman whose first stateside order of business is to hack the computer of Luke Hobbs, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, to find Toretto and his cohorts. Hobbs has this information because, last time on The Fast and the Furious, Hobbs's DSS agent practically blackmailed Toretto and company to help him take down a mercenary organization run by Deckard Shaw's brother, Owen, Luke Evans. In exchange for succeeding at this job and killing Owen, Hobbs cleared the criminal records the Toretto team acquired 2 movies ago. For having this information, Hobbs is severely injured by Deckard in one of Furious 7's numerous fight sequences. Toretto reassembles his crew, which includes Brian, IT guy Tej, Chris Ludacris Bridges, smooth talker Roman Tyrese, and Dominic's partner Letty, Michelle Rodriguez. Letty has amnesia because previously on The Fast and the Furious, she got blown up and was presumed dead. Though she has no memory of her former romantic life with Dominic, he holds out hope she'll regain her memory. The biggest catfights in the movie aren't between Ronda Rousey and Michelle Rodriguez, they're between the 2 men. Deckard somehow manages to appear wherever Toretto is, demanding retribution and throwing monkey wrenches into Toretto's plans. The 2 constantly crash their cars into each other, then crawl out of the wreckage to brawl with pipes, fists, and feet. It's hilarious, as if Deckard has a tracking device on Toretto and is stalking him like a scorned lover. Speaking of tracking devices, Furious 7 not only has one, it's the most powerful spy device in film history. Currently in the hands of Jakande, Jiman Hansu, it uses surveillance cameras, cell phones, and other eyes in the sky to track anybody. Toretto's team is hired to retrieve it so they can track Deckard, though as Toretto correctly notes, I could just stand here and wait for him to find me. If he had, old people like me wouldn't be blessed with an appearance by Snake Plissken himself, Kurt Russell. Russell's Mr. Nobody provides information and the use of the device should Toretto retrieve it. He's a classic Kurt Russell character, and as the Gershwins once queried, who could ask for anything more? He steals the film simply by putting on night vision sunglasses. The tracking device comes with a gorgeous programmer named Ramsey, Nathalie Emmanuel, and enough enemies to populate a final battle that basically levels Los Angeles. Amidst all this carnage, Furious 7 finds time for drool-worthy car porn and so many shots of bikini-clad females that it feels like a Zucker-Abraham Zucker parody of Baby Got Back. Even Ramsey gets a gratuitous ogling by the camera. That is, when it's not licking car metal and panting over its willful destruction. I haven't scratched the surface of the plot. Not that it matters, though, as the film's primary concern is putting its viewers through an action-packed ringer. Juan, whose hyper-camera tricks have annoyed me in movies like Insidious, The Conjuring, and Saw, has finally found the right project to match his style. The fight sequences have the usual sped-up kinetics, but Juan frames them so they're not hard to follow. The car scenes are equally proficient. And the film's midsection, which piles action sequence upon action sequence, is the most riveting and exciting set piece I've seen in years. It pulses with adrenaline and a visual humor to match the comic camaraderie of its characters. The actors, whose appearances span several entries in the series, have a character-driven, lived-in comfort with one another. They are all believable as the family Toretto refers to in that cheesy line from the commercial. This is an immensely entertaining movie, and if the filmmakers are wise, they'll quit on this high note. One final thing. Furious 7 ends with a wonderful tribute to Paul Walker, the actor who was killed in a car accident in the middle of filming this movie. Before a montage of his appearances in the series, there's a callback to the first film and some tender dialogue between Diesel and Walker. Juan's camera then catches an overhead shot of a highway dividing. As Diesel narrates, we see the 2 leads' cars go in different directions, like a visual representation of Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken. Since Walker appeared in 6 of the 7 films, he is the series' equivalent of the North Star. Future installments will find that fixed mark of the Northern Hemisphere's upward gaze missing from its sky. So this tribute is very emotional for fans of both the series and the actor, because it's as if the fictional Furious 7 knows that you know that Walker is gone. And yet, I must admit there are moments in the film where this knowledge makes for uncomfortable viewing. Some of the more vicious car crashes and explosions are uneasy reminders, and while the film is careful not to evoke any parallels in scenes with Walker, his untimely death was never far from my mind. This is not a criticism. As I said, the tribute is wonderful, and the movie is a lot of fun. It's just an acknowledgement that I sometimes felt guilty for enjoying the car chases so much. Your mileage may vary. My love for the Fast and Furious franchise cannot be contained. It knows no bounds. It is an unstoppable, almost supernatural force that has led me to marathon the entire 6-movie set more times than I can count. For God's sake, I co-host a dedicated Fast and Furious podcast. And here's the thing. I don't think I'm alone. Granted, my obsession may run a little deeper than it does for most, but the progenitor of this series is now 14 years old. Today, there are teenagers who have quite literally grown up with Dom, Brian, and the gang. Obviously, at its most basic level, each new Fast film is a high-budget ode to street racing and explosions. But this has also now become a telenovela for the movie-going set. Once every year or two, we check in on the Torettos, the O'Connors, and their perfect little slice of L.A. We want to know how they're doing. Mia's baby must be getting big now. The downside to this kind of mad devotion to Vin Diesel's kingdom of steel and testosterone, of course, is that disappointment is a substantial and ever-present risk. And never has anticipation for a Fast and Furious film been greater, both for me personally and for the movie-going population at large, than it has ahead of the release of Furious 7. There's certainly some morbid fascination around the tragic mid-filming death of Paul Walker and how his central character of Brian O'Connor would be handled, but there's also the simple reality that this is a Fast and Furious joint. They always get bigger, crazier, more deliciously absurd. Considering the precedent set by Fast 5 and Fast and Furious 6, it's a tough benchmark to beat. I sound ungrateful, but believe me, I appreciate the thought behind Juan's effort to cover all of this nostalgic ground in a little over 2 hours. It just doesn't work. It doesn't cohere. I felt strangely disengaged with these characters that I had learned to love over a decade and a half. I just wanted something to sink my teeth into, but Juan rarely gives the viewer an opportunity. It's probably no coincidence that the last 4 films were all directed by Justin Lin, whose deft touch for the franchise was sorely missed here. Lin's unapologetic love for over-the-top explosions was just as honed as Wan's, but he did a far better job taking our hands and leading us through each film, building characters and relationships along the way. And his hype-building post-credit scenes were legendary. Furious 7 has none. Justin, when you're done with your True Detective adventure, come back. James Wan, please return to the Saw series, because the first one was your magnum opus. As for the handling of Walker's death, without spoiling it, I'll only say that it left me as unsatisfied as most of Furious 7's mindless vignettes. The strategy seemed strangely rushed and poorly thought out, considering the additional production time that was allotted to rewrite the script. In the inevitable Fast 8, the screenwriters will still have a bit more work to do to fully explain O'Connor's, and, in all likelihood, Mia's, absence. It's entirely possible, of course, that my fandom has simply blinded me to Furious 7's greatness. The action sequences, particularly Abu Dhabi, with the supercar leaping between buildings, are legitimately phenomenal, and the scenes filmed after Walker's passing, in which his brothers stepped in for him, were never distracting or even noticeable without looking closely. Maybe I'm missing something. The early reviews are extremely positive, and Rotten Tomatoes is closing in on 90%. Maybe my expectations were unrealistic. Maybe nothing short of a 4-hour marathon with 45 minutes of heart-pounding race wars would have fit my bill. And if Furious 7 deserves credit for one thing, it's closing, or at least trying to close, some doors from the past that make way for new ones to be opened. Vin Diesel says that the next movie will be set in New York, a marked departure from the series' deep LA roots. And Lucas Black, Tokyo Drift's Sean Boswell, has been rumored to return in 8 and beyond. Maybe he can step up and start to fill the huge hole left by Paul Walker. Either way, I encourage action movie buffs and die-hard Fast fanatics alike to see this one, preferably on opening weekend when the theater is thick with hype. There's no other franchise where clapping and screaming throughout the movie is as utterly appropriate. I need people to talk about it with, after all. Let me start by explaining what I wanted to do with this review, and then I will explain what is actually happening. I have seen Furious 7 twice without seeing any of the other Fast and Furious films. What I plan to do for this retrospective, which is in preparation for the new movie The Fate of the Furious, was to go back and watch every Fast and Furious film and review them. Instead, I watched the first 2 and then decided to watch this again, drunk on microbrew beer and Mexican food, because that is clearly the most reasonable state to watch a Fast and Furious film in. The only thing closer to right would be for me to be drinking strictly Corona. As a result, I am reviewing Furious 7 without a whole lot of knowledge of the franchise, and I am also watching it drunk, so, get. Deckard Shaw, Jason Statham, is the brother of Owen Shaw, Luke Evans, and he is out for revenge. Why? Because cars and stuff. He's Jason Statham. You really don't need to be asking many questions. Get off my back. He's the villain. That's all you need to know. Brian Paul Walker is now a family man, married to Jordana Brewster's Mia with a kid. Relegated to a minivan, he feels out of place in a world that travels slower than 90 miles per hour. Then there's Dom, Vin Diesel, and Letty, Michelle Rodriguez, the latter part of this duo being, in soap opera fashion, brain-wiped by head trauma. Total amnesia. She doesn't even remember Hector. Poor Hector, we hardly knew you. She also doesn't remember Iggy Azalea. But to be honest, I don't think anyone remembers her being part of Race Wars, an unfortunate title for a racing event that the Fast and Furious franchise has boldly doubled down on. The best part about Furious 7 is that literally everything I have said up to this point is meaningless. You can disregard all of this and still enjoy the film. And I haven't even mentioned Han or Hobbs, Dwayne Johnson, or any of the other supporting characters that are involved. Hell, you can disregard every plot point in this film and still enjoy it on a base level. The dialogue of the film is heavily laden in melodrama worthy of Days of Our Lives or General Hospital. Yet it is a billion-dollar movie. The creative team behind these films have made it possible to make a film in which no line of dialogue means anything, and every scene is still endlessly entertaining. Is Furious 7 a perfect film? Only time will tell. This film is great, Note, 6 beers in. Diesel's mushmouth delivery makes every line a punchline. The act of vengeance is turned into a intramural sport involving head-on collisions resulting in no scratches and concrete stomping. Kurt Russell plays a character called Mr. Nobody, and it is not played for a laugh, and The Rock flexes his way out of a cast. I don't know if Furious 7 takes itself seriously. I don't know if director James Wan takes the franchise seriously. I don't know if people giving this franchise money take it seriously. But I take it very seriously. Why? Because the Fast and Furious franchise is a cinematic soap opera filled with enough testosterone spilling out of its ears to make bodybuilders quiver.
Yeah.
It's a testosterone wet dream wrapped up in so much camp that it is impossible to know if the camp is intentional or not. Every shot in this film is hilarious. Sometimes the hilarity is intentional. Mostly it is not intentional. Take, for example, the scene in the film that cuts between two characters talking on the phone. It is a scene in which every shot is an intense mobile camera shot that wraps 360 around the character. It's a phone conversation shot like a modern standoff. At one point, Dom says, "This time, it's not just about being fast." You mean the other 6 times it was just about being fast? Was the furious part just a ruse? You're just getting furious the 7th time around? Did I mention that our heroes skydive out of planes inside of cars? They are inside cars and then use parachutes to land the cars after falling thousands of feet. I mean, why? They land onto a road, so they could have just, drove there. So why? If your answer to that question was, why not? Then you are a true Fast and Furious fan, and we should hang out over a couple of Coronas. Furious 7 is the guilty pleasure heaven of guilty pleasure action films. I have been searching for the same guilty pleasure feeling in early Fast and Furious films, and it simply is not there. I wasn't sure why this was, until now. Note, 10 beers in. The reality is that the Fast and Furious franchise has never been good. It started out mediocre and went downhill, until Fast 5. What I believe has happened with this franchise is this. There is a point where camp reaches a fever pitch. A franchise like this is allowed to continue, upping the ante until any semblance of reality is thrown out of the Corvette window at 120 miles per hour, and eventually its lack of realism reaches the sublime. Now, sublimation is a scientific term. As such, I know pretty much nothing about it. My brain shrunken to the size of a peanut by the sheer amount of movies that I watch when I should be reading books. But what I do know is that sublimation involves the process of solids being turned into vapor. Well, that is exactly what the Fast and the Furious does. It starts as a solid, a half-baked, high-concept action movie idea turned into the schlock film that everyone expects. But this solid makes money, and its sequel makes money, and its sequel's sequel makes enough money. Eventually, this solid has been diluted until the franchise is essentially just spewing hot air, but the heat feels warm and comforting. Sublimation. In aesthetics, the sublime refers to a state of awe at the grandeur of enormous spectacle. In the Gothic tradition, this sublime spectacle is found in the power of nature and the decay of architecture. In The Fast and the Furious, it is found in loud noises and people in cars doing things that would get normal people killed. The sublime is not about any depth of storytelling or thematic ideas. It's about taking in the moment as a spectacle. It is about imbibing pure awesomeness. Furious 7 certainly abandons storytelling and thematic ideas, and it provides the awesome in the way of cars leaping from building to building and mortal men with the superhuman ability to stomp cement and break open casts with broken arms. Is Furious 7 a perfect film? Is it the modern sublime? Or is it merely that fast things being blowed up and scantily clad women featured in butt close-ups is the way to $1 billion payday? Can it be a little of column A? A little of column B? Is this movie bad? Am I having a crisis of faith here? I'm halfway through the film, 12 beers in, and you're coming into my house saying this movie is all about the male gaze and testosterone-infused power dynamics? I mean, I just got to the good part. They're in Abu Dhabi. They played 12 seconds of Turn Down for What and 25 seconds of Going Down for Real in the span of 2 minutes. There's sand everywhere, cars jumping over buildings. Ronda Rousey for a second, and you're coming into my house saying I have a drinking problem. Ahem, sorry about that. I lost my head for a second. Yes, the Fast and Furious franchise has a problem with the male gaze, But you can't possibly expect a film like this to know any better. The film is a child. It needs time to learn. I mean, these screenwriters think a car can be held up in freefall by a parachute. They probably don't fully understand what a butt does, let alone know an appropriate way to represent it on screen. So now I think that we are in agreement. Furious 7 is the perfect film. It is the 21st century's Citizen Kane. Future generations will use this film and little else to judge us all by. Furious 7 will be the representation of America for years to come. When all of us die and can no longer speak for ourselves, Furious 7 will speak for us. This is what we all wanted, right? Fast and Furious movies have always had a charming, cheesy bravado, and muscled up and oafishly macho as they may be, grunting with almost Dada levels of male performance, the films, beginning with The Fast and the Furious in 2001, have never been afraid of a little tough guy heart. Vin Diesel's character loves to gravel on about the importance of family, but they've never really had any poignancy to them, have never provoked much emotion beyond a giddy feeling of excitement and, let's be honest, no small amount of arousal. All that vroom vroom, all that shake shake, all that flex flex, come on! Until Furious 7, that is. The latest film, which opens Friday, can't help but take on some deeper meaning, as the death of main cast member Paul Walker, killed in a car accident in late 2013, looms large throughout. But it doesn't overwhelm. Furious 7 is respectful, even solemn when it needs to be, but is still, thank God, plenty of crazy fun. We'll get to the serious stuff, but first let's appreciate what a dopey, joyous wonder this film franchise has become. What began almost quaintly small-scale in the first film, drag racing SoCal rough riders who stage nighttime raids on freight trucks, has ballooned into a never-ending global melee. Diesel's Dominic Toretto and his crew, which includes Walker's Brian O'Connor and Michelle Rodriguez's Letty Ortiz, among many others, have become international mercenaries of a sort, a family that works for itself, but is inevitably swept up in some kind of larger intrigue. Why a gang of gearheads from the wilds of Los Angeles would be so routinely involved in and capable of navigating such high-stakes adventures isn't worth thinking about. The F&F movies long ago skipped the realm of plausibility, or reason. The plot: after Dominic, Vin Diesel, and his crew took down the mercenary Owen Shaw, his brother Deckard, Jason Statham, killed Dom's friend Han and is out for revenge against the rest of them. Bringing the gang together for one last ride, they are recruited by government spook Mr. Nobody, Kurt Russell, for a favor. In exchange, he will help them get Deckard and put an end to his path of vengeance before they lose someone else. James Wan isn't officially credited as a co-writer here, and the script is being handled by series regular Chris Morgan, but it is very apparent that something is different about the writing of this film. While I freely admit that the action scenes and car races have kept a pretty good average throughout the series so far, attempts at pathos haven't been so lucky. Whether it's through unintentional sexual tension, Too Fast, Too Furious, misguided attempts at accents, Tokyo Drift, or simply through weak dramatic writing, pretty much all of them, the characters may be able to provide good chemistry with each other, but have never really been able to translate that into effective drama. Within the first few minutes, we have a scene with Dom and Letty, Michelle Rodriguez, that throw out whatever expectations I had for this film to start with, and actually made for some damn good character drama. Talking about Letty's still-present amnesia and how it is affecting their relationship. Sounds kind of stupid when I put it like that, but bear with me on this one. This is just a taste of what the film is going to contain. I'm not 100% certain if the somber tone to the film is a result of the untimely passing of series star Paul Walker during production. But even then, that wouldn't explain why that dramatic moment, along with the many others to follow, hit as hard as they do. Of course, said tribute to Paul Walker at the end is all kinds of heartbreaking, without coming across as too sentimental. It hits that sweet spot of pathos without descending into complete saccharine. The post-production put at work here to compensate for Walker's absence is exceptionally well done, too. Trust Weta Digital to help create effects that I legitimately couldn't spot, no matter how hard I tried. Of course, having a good director is only half of the puzzle, so it's a good thing that the cast here carries over most of the series regulars, all of whom have gotten very good at their respective roles. Paul Walker does well at portraying the choice between family life and criminal life. Vin Diesel is the badass papa bear of the crew. Ludacris still gets laughs as part of the techie Tej. Tyrese may annoy at points as Roman, but he is still put to good use within the story. Michelle Rodriguez continues her stint as one of the few performances involving amnesia that I actually buy into without activating a gag reflex, and Dwayne Johnson is still in full scene-stealing mode as before. That is, when he's actually in a scene. Yeah, this turned some people off, but he gets sidelined for the majority of the film. To be fair, though, he does end up coming back for the finale in a way filled with such action cheese that I don't even want to hint at it. It's glorious in every way possible. A possible reason for his sidelining, though, might be so that his screen presence didn't distract too much from those of the new cast members, whom all do more than enough to fill up the gap left by Johnson. Jason Statham, to put it simply, is the best casting choice for this franchise. An action hero with driving experience. Honestly, I'm surprised he wasn't tapped for this sooner. He makes for a great antagonist for the Toretto crew, presenting a far more immediate threat than the series is used to showing and easily making for the best one yet. Alongside him, we also have Kurt Russell, who manages to pull off a G-Man character that actually seems trustworthy through his performance, not to mention getting a damn cool action hero moment on screen. Even Nathalie Emmanuel as the fairly generic hot hacker chick Ramsey is decent, especially at keeping up with the regulars. Probably the weakest point in the entire cast is Lucas Black returning for a cameo as Tokyo Drift lead Sean, and that's only because in the nearly 10-year gap between Drift and this movie, his southern accent is still as horrible as it was before. But dramatic weight and competency with the acting, as much as I hate to admit it, always places second in this franchise to the action scenes in terms of importance. Now, in the last installment, I thought the series had reached a new height in over-the-top ludicrousness that couldn't be topped. Anyone who has seen the trailer for this film, complete with parachuting cars, will know that they somehow managed it. There are 3 main action set pieces in this film. The parachuting cars, a heist that takes place around the midway point, and the finale. And the amount of amazingly bonkers moments the filmmakers managed to include within those 3 is staggering. Seriously, my jaw hasn't dropped this many times watching a single film in a long while, especially when it comes to the finale. Having Statham in the cast list also means that we get even more fist fights than usual. Because thankfully Juan knows better than to waste talent when he gets it, and seeing him in action just makes me hate the thoroughly disappointing Expendables 3 even more. This is what a send-up of classic action movies should look like. Unfortunately, Juan's inexperience with action movies does shine through in a certain aspect. The cinematography, specifically, the fact that there are numerous shots during the fist fights where the camera will just rotate to emphasize the action. To be fair, this works with the ebb and flow of the action on screen, but the constant spinning of the camera did make me a bit dizzy at points. What makes the action work even better is that, despite how bombastic it is, it somehow manages to fit together with the more serious character moments without clashing in any ugly fashion. What does ultimately end up clashing with those exchanges is yet another issue with the cinematography, only this time it's something that's been prevalent in the series since the beginning. It's been a running joke when talking about this series that both the cars and the scantily clad women on screen are shot in the exact same way, as sexily as possible. In the other films, this hasn't really bothered me, but it seems like the pornographic lens on display has even less restraint than it did before. The constant ass shots in certain scenes, particularly during the opening drag race and the heist scene, are really distracting. I'm sure that that's the point of their inclusion in the first place, but it definitely detracts from not only the more serious moments, but also from the overblown action beats a bit as well. The soundtrack feels like it combines the best elements of every other soundtrack in the series together. Worldly hip-hop, more terrestrial trap music, courtesy of cats like Wiz Khalifa and Sage the Gemini, and once again, this film provides tracks containing them that doesn't make me want to vom my guts up like they usually do. Hard rock through Brian Tyler's stellar musical score, bass-heavy dance jams thanks to DJ Snake and David Guetta, among others, and a very appreciated inclusion of the DJ Shadow joint 6 Days, which was previously used as the opening song for Tokyo Drift. I also consider it to be the single best piece of music this franchise has ever employed, so bonus points for that one. All in all, it's kind of astounding that the Fast and Furious franchise is capable of something like this. The action is gloriously over the top as always and manages to reach new peaks of insanity at times, and the comedic banter is still in top form. But the dramatic beats hit harder than I ever could have anticipated and made for a very deservedly somber piece, made even better by the fact that these elements fit nicely next to each other. It may be so overstuffed with awesome that it can feel bloated at certain points, but for the most part, this is an excellent action flick. Much like the rest of the series, this is a very insular film, so unless you've kept up with the rest of the series or feel like going through some of the series' uglier moments in their entirety, some of the more dramatic moments may not have the same impact. However, because of how great the action beats are, I'm still recommending this even if you haven't seen the rest of the series. Hell, it's just that good that you might want to check out the rest of the series afterwards anyway. Suffice it to say, though I always seem to end up seeing the films, I'm not a huge fan. So it is with a kind of slack-jawed astonishment that I'm telling you that not only is Furious 7 good, not only is it the best film in the series, but it's the best film of 2015 to date. Admittedly not an incredible achievement, but still. I'm not a hater of the franchise by any means, but you have to understand that these films are primarily made for people who love cars and love driving them fast. The worst thing that can ever happen to an automobile is for me to become its owner. I have not once but twice driven cars into houses, the last time just simply trying to back out of a driveway. So, a film series targeted at people who get aroused looking at an issue of car and driver is not really something that appeals to me. So, that this film kept me smiling, entertained, awed, and engaged for over 2 hours is all the more an amazing feat. I will admit that the last 30 minutes of Fast 6 really grabbed my interest and contains one of the most incredible stunts I've ever seen in any film. That film ended with a post-credits scene of one of the main cast being slaughtered by Jason Statham, this film's villain and the brother of the character played by Luke Evans in prior films. Statham's character, Deckard Shaw, gives Furious 7 something that most of the other films in the series have lacked. A villain with the skills to do actual harm to Vin Diesel's family of maniac drivers. From the opening scene, Shaw's mission of vengeance is given real weight, and no one feels untouchable. Agent Hobbs, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, Furious 7, the government, as it so happens, is also interested in tracking down Shaw, and enlists Diesel's group, introducing Kurt Russell into the series as Kurt Russell, but also giving us an excuse to spend more time with, by far, my favorite character in the series, The Rock's Agent Hobbs. The plot is really just an excuse to run around the world. This almost feels like an old-school Bond film at times, and set up different fights and action set pieces, but that's fine. This is summer popcorn, explosion-hugging action times 10, tightly and skillfully directed by James Wan. Paul Walker Furious 7, the cinematography and fight choreography are outstanding. The cast is enormous, and in addition to the old gang, we introduce Tony Jaa, Jaimon Hansu, Kurt Russell, and Nathalie Emmanuel. The chemistry between the core characters is solid, and there's a gravitas behind their band of brothers and sisters because of what we know happened to Paul Walker during filming. Walker, who died in a car accident unrelated to the film, is given a very fitting, very poignant send-off. His scenes were finished with the help of his two brothers, and there were a few times I could tell that they were putting Paul's face on another Walker's body, but only because I knew what I was looking for and looking at. It's not distracting at all, and tragic though it is that he didn't live to see the film's release. His character's arc and the film's quality was in no way diminished by his passing. Furious 7, I don't even want to get into the stunts in this film, because they're so outrageous, so well done, and so over the top, that I have no idea how they're going to top themselves in the future. You've seen them go car skydiving in the trailer, but that is not even one of the top 2 stunts in the film. When the film gets to the desert, get ready for something ridiculous, in the context of things already being absurd in this high-octane universe. Furious 7, Paul Walker. The series is going to go on without Walker. Diesel has said that Fast 8 will take place in New York, and the movie leaves room open for a sequel. Diesel also has said that Furious 7 is going to win the Oscar for Best Picture, which it would if voting ended today, and I have to say, if it was given out for sheer manic fun, it just might. I thought the 2015 movie year wasn't going to really start until Avengers Age of Ultron hit theaters on May 1st, but Furious 7 has brought the sunshine a month earlier. If you'd have told me after watching the first Fast and Furious movie that they would end up making 7 of them, I would have laughed. Now, somehow I'm glad they did. Furious 7 is the 7th installment in the Fast and Furious world of lightning-fast cars, scantily clad women, brutal hand-to-hand combat, and ridiculous one-liners. Most of the cast is back, including Vin Diesel, Michelle Rodriguez, Tyrese Gibson, Ludacris, and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, with Jason Statham and Michael Douglas playing large roles in this one as well. And that's before mentioning the late Paul Walker, who had much of his performance already recorded before he passed away in a tragic car accident last year. And that tragedy, of course, looms heavy over the film in many different ways, but let's talk first about the movie itself. It's a down-the-line Fast and Furious movie, and I actually kind of mean that as a compliment. I mean, there's something confident about a franchise that gets what it is and wholeheartedly embraces it. Technically, it's tight. The story is solid, and the action, as over-the-top as it is shot really well. You don't ever really get confused during these intricate car chases and fistfights, despite all the moving pieces and people. And that's not an easy thing to pull off. And yes, it's over the top in completely ridiculous ways, but that's the goal, right? There is no semblance of the real world here, but it's consistent with its own world, and that confidence is what can make it fun for the audience. In this world, men fall 20 stories and break a couple bones. In my world, I eat a piece of lasagna and chip my tooth on the fork. And no, that's not a joke. Happened like 3 days ago. My point is, if you can give in to the silliness of it all, you might just have a lot of fun. And for that matter, you might be moved. The way they crafted this movie to be a tribute to Paul Walker was genuinely affecting. You can really tell this group of people lost a member of their family. And even in a movie as silly as this, I got a little emotional, especially at the end. Having said that, having to work around his absence to finish the movie did get a bit distracting for me. You could see moments where the same shots were cut in more than once for reactions, or segments where he didn't have any lines because they hadn't shot it yet. It's admirable how they found a way to make it work, but for me it distracted me from the story a few times. Plus, the circumstances of his death seem so closely related to the live fast mentality of the film that it's hard for that not to cast a shadow as well. These movies are all about the adrenaline of masculinity without the consequence, and that's just not something that carries over into real life. But my worst thing? The cheesy one-liners. I mean, come on. You're better than that, Dwayne Johnson. At least I think you are. Overall, if you can stand the ridiculousness of the Fast and Furious world, you're going to have another great time. It's well made, adrenaline-packed, and even a bit touching. The light scent of spring that waltzed in late in 2015 was blasted away this weekend by a windstorm of exhaust, carbon, screaming rubber, and NOS, like only Vin Diesel's Dominic Toretto's Dodge Charger can spit out. With this chaotic, heated haze also comes both the revisiting of established on-screen romances and the reiteration of reinforced iron-hard bromances in Furious 7, 2015, the latest model of the Fast and the Furious. I have an inclination to believe that critics went soft on this movie for sympathy's sake, and instead turned a blind eye on the overly dramatized acting, stilted dialogue, and the cubbyhole of cliches. It reminds one of action movies in the 90s, and the Expendables, 2010. This is what sets apart movies like the Dark Knight trilogy, which have equally explosive scenes, but far more substance in writing and plot development. Furious 7 once again reunites the all-star cast led by Dom Toretto and Hobbs, Dwayne Johnson, as an old threat comes back to haunt them. The brother of Fast Six's villain, Deckard Shaw, Jason Statham, is out for revenge against those who killed his sibling, and with help from Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker, Letty, Michelle Rodriguez, Roman, Tyrese Gibson, and Tej Ludacris, they must bring down Shaw and save the world once more. Action is synonymous with the Fast and Furious franchise, and luckily the seventh entry is no different. It gets even more bonkers and even more thrilling, with some of the best stunts I've ever seen, such as cars jumping across skyscrapers in Dubai to the destruction of a hospital in one of the greatest single-take openings I've seen in recent years. The stunt work is truly fantastic, from the fistfights to the racing, all of which feels real and absolutely thrilling. On the topic of the fistfights, they were really great here, with the fantastic sound editing and stunt work, meaning you could truly feel every punch or, incidentally, every hit with a steel pole. When you think of modern-day ensemble casts, a few names pop up. The Avengers, Ocean's 11, X-Men, but rarely does Fast and Furious pop up. It really should. Not one member of the main cast, consisting of about 9 worldwide stars, lets any of the others down, and the chemistry between them is palpable. They feel so natural with each other that it's hard to believe that they haven't known each other all their lives, let alone the 14 years since the first film's release. Particular standouts include the relationship between Tyrese Gibson's Roman and Ludacris' Tej, who have astounding chemistry and great back-and-forth dialogue. Also great is Paul Walker, who has the perfect balance between action and comedy, and Kurt Russell, who is surprisingly great in a role he easily could have phoned in for a good paycheck. Just one issue, Iggy Azalea. Please, no Iggy Azalea. On a technical level, Furious 7 is pretty darn great. I've already gone into depth about the action, but that's not all. With some great CGI, which does admittedly falter at times, a brilliant, upbeat R&B soundtrack, and superb editing. The races are handled so well by director James Wan in his first non-horror film, and his direction is really confident and promising. There are some stunning establishing shots that helps make the cinematography really great at times, also accentuated by some lovely lighting and great colors. The practical effects are really great too, particularly the aforementioned races and scenes involving cars in general, which all look fantastic. Furious 7 was the first film of 2015 to gross over $1 billion, and it is wholly deserving of such an accolade in such a crowded and important year for film. Aside from some dodgy CGI, product placement, and iffy cameos, it managed to thrill at 1 minute with its high-octane action and punchy dialogue, but soar even more at the next when it slows down and breathes, providing some really great character moments. Its last 20 minutes are hugely touching and moving, with a beautiful send-off for a life cut tragically too short. Furious 7 is easily one of the greatest films of the year and deserves all the praise and success it gets. First of all, there is a friend of the blog who I had a recent discussion with about Guardians of the Galaxy being a turn-off-your-brain popcorn movie. I disagreed with that conclusion. However, my friend Guardians should win a Pulitzer Prize compared to this nonsense. I guarantee you will not like Furious 7. It is not the movie for you. I kept trying to decide why such insanity is better than the explosions and over-the-top antics of a Michael Bay movie. Why are his films so nauseating, but something like this still feels fun? I honestly don't know if I can explain it. If any of you have insight, I'd love to hear it. The best I can determine is Michael Bay movies' attempt at humor distances the audience from the characters, and then he tries too hard to create a reverence around characters instead of just being an over-the-top action film. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was probably the best he's done. I know not technically directed by Bay, but having his stamp in a long time. The problem with Turtles is it was edited so poorly. I had no idea who they were fighting and where they were, so it was just confusing when it should have been fun. The villain was also muddled and confusing when it should have been awesome Shredder. Furious 7 has over-the-top set pieces, but I always knew who they were fighting, who the bad guy was, and what they were after. It isn't as coherent and exciting as 5 and 6, which were basically heist pictures, but it ups the ante on the insanity. Plus, the actors sell the crazy scenes in a way that Bay's films never do. It feels like they are having a blast. They did a flawless job dealing with the death of Paul Walker. Evidently, some of him was added in CGI, some was using past movies, film he had shot and his brothers standing in. I certainly couldn't tell. It all looked like him from beginning to end to me. They also have a lovely tribute to him and a very nice sign-off. With certain movies, you have to look at what it is trying to do and then ask, did it do it well? With Furious 7, they were trying to make an over-the-top action film, and they do a great job with it. I'm normally not a big fan of those type of movies, but I was entertained by it. I had a good time. Take that for what you will. It's kind of a hard movie to give a grade to because it's so absurd, but entertaining. Vin Diesel deadlifts a car, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson bicep flexes out of a plaster cast, and cars get dropped out of a plane for a remote car chase on the Caucasus Mountains. Go throw your money at this movie. But I figured that since Furious 7 made nearly $400 million worldwide this weekend, quite a few of you have made it out to see the 7th installment in the Fast and Furious franchise. The film series, with the exception of Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, centers around the exploits of Los Angeles street racer Dominic Toretto, Vin Diesel, and FBI agent-turned-street racer Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker. The strength of the franchise has been the interplay and chemistry of the two characters and actors. Walker was the more natural leading man, and the bulk of emotional weight in the films was placed on him, while Diesel played the role of alpha patriarch, whose emotional moments only worked in short bursts and tertiary to the main narrative of the films. Furious 7 faced the unfortunate real-life problem of dealing with Walker's death midway through filming, which caused the shutdown of production and major rewrites of the script. Without O'Connor's story, the emotional narrative burden falls on Toretto's shoulder to bear, and the film suffers for it. Now, the Fast franchise has never been about the plot, but great action films click when the viewer has investment in the stakes that guide the insane set pieces and sequences of physicality. Toretto's romance with Letty, Michelle Rodriguez, comes to the forefront in this story, and that is to the detriment of viewers. Their chemistry throughout the series has never worked for me, and Letty trying to recover from amnesia is C-level soap opera drama. The plot of Furious 7 takes place in the immediate aftermath of the events of Fast and Furious 6. This is a revenge film set about by Deckard Shaw, Jason Statham, to avenge the near death, no one ever dies in this franchise, of his brother. Shaw is described as an ex-Special Forces operative who was too much even for a secret military killing concern. Shaw in this film is basically the boogeyman, appearing at nearly every turn to terrorize the Toretto crew. This maximizes the power of Statham as a physical threat to every room he is in, but his aura trivializes the major subplot of the movie, which revolves around the Toretto crew searching for the ultimate government surveillance device known as the God's Eye. This subplot in itself is a forced commentary on the conversation of electronic surveillance, but it works well enough to move the story along. With the rise of Toretto's prominence within the context of the story, leaves a lot of valuable supporting characters with little to do other than fight and exist. Dwayne Johnson's Hobbs is sidelined for much of the movie, but boy does he reintroduce himself into the plot with an insane sequence, and Thai fighting star Tony Jaa of Ong Bak fame gets limited to 2 brief fight sequences. Hobbs, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, is working late in the office at his job as some sort of government agent. He's paid a visit by Deckard Shaw, Jason Statham, that ends with a fistfight and explosion. Later, Dom, Vin Diesel, Brian, Paul Walker, and his wife, Jordana Brewster, narrowly escape an explosion at Brian's house from his hospital bed. Hobbs reveals Shaw's identity. He's the brother of the bad guy that Hobbs, Dom, Brian, and their merry gang took out in the previous installment. Hell-bent on revenge, Shaw represents your classic Gruber Brothers situation, as personified by Hans and Simon in Die Hard and Die Hard with a Vengeance, respectively. So now, wanting their own revenge for Shaw's attempts at revenge, the Furious crew drive lots of cars fast, kit them out with silly gadgets, and drop awkward lines of terrible tough guy dialogue on the regular. I had little to no idea what was happening for the vast majority of Fast and Furious 7. That's not to say that it's complicated or doesn't make sense. It's just that I don't care what's happening in a movie like this. The plot is so secondary and superfluous to the action. I'm happy to just assume there's a storyline and that it makes sense because I just have no interest in paying attention to it. The Stathey really is a perfect addition to this world. His Crank movies are the first time I remember being a ward of this approach to over-the-top action and loving it. So he slots into this world effortlessly, violently, and with just the right amount of gravelly, almost whispered approach to every single line of dialogue. His addition is much like the movies in the series themselves. I'm sure they'll eventually reach a tipping point and crumble under the weight of their own excess. But for now, Fast and Furious 7 is proof that when it comes to this particular franchise, more really is more. If Han's death, in a burning car no less, casts a somewhat eerie pall over Furious 7, it's not the only thing that does. Walker O'Connor is first seen revving the engine of a most atypical vehicle, a Chrysler minivan, with his infant son strapped into a car seat in the back. And one of the new film's running themes is that, while marriage and fatherhood may have domesticated Brian, he still pines for his old rebel outlaw days. He says he misses the bullets, notes wife Mia, Jordana Brewster, as if it were a perfectly normal sentiment. But how much longer can, or should, Brian continue to put himself in harm's way when he has a young family waiting for him at home? The arrival of Deckard momentarily makes that a moot point, as everyone, even still amnesiac Letty, Michelle Rodriguez, readies for battle. Then comes another new cast member, a silver-tongued government shadow man, Kurt Russell, who refers to himself as Mr. Nobody and tells Dom he can help him eliminate Shaw, provided Dom does something for him first. G-Man Russell needs help with the rescue of a kidnapped computer hacker, Ramsey, Nathalie Emmanuel, who's being held by Hounsou's Mose Jaconde somewhere in the Caucasus. Unspecified political concerns prevent the U.S. from staging an official rescue mission. Ramsey has developed a software program, unsubtly named God's Eye, that can track anyone's movements at any point on the globe through any available camera or cell phone. In the wrong hands, it could be a disaster. Think Edward Snowden's worst nightmare, times infinity. Things manage to get even more complicated, perhaps a bit too much, from there, in a story that hopscotches to Azerbaijan and Abu Dhabi before finally ending up back in L.A. But then, the special appeal of the Fast movies has never lain in the what they do and when, but rather how they do it. As in, how do you manage to deposit a half-dozen high-test supercars on a remote stretch of winding Azerbaijani mountainside without raising too many eyebrows? Why? Parachute them out of a cargo plane, of course, with the drivers already buckled in. Note that this is not the last time a car will glide balletically through the air in Furious 7. Nor is it even the second to last time. Juan and veteran Furious stunt coordinator / second unit director Spiro Rosatos also stage a jaw-dropping literal cliffhanger involving an overturned bus sliding towards certain doom, and later, a ridiculous but highly entertaining car chase that begins inside one of Abu Dhabi's skyscraping Etihad towers and ends in a neighboring one, without ever touching the ground. Not all of the action quite lives up to those high standards, and none of it can quite surpass the sublime Fast 5 finale, in which two Dodge Chargers towed a massive bank vault through the streets of Rio de Janeiro. Juan, a master of old-school analog frights in his horror movies, favors a more frenetic shooting and editing style here and gooses his set pieces with too much CGI. The movie is also, at 137 minutes, arguably too much of a good thing. Still, Furious 7 has few equals in the category of sevens, and outside of the James Bond franchise, which was up to Diamonds Are Forever, at a comparable point in its lifespan, it's hard to think of another contemporary film series that has run this long while continuing to afford so much pleasure. Harder still to think of another mainstream Hollywood blockbuster, past or present, with this level of ethnic and socioeconomic diversity on display, just because that's who the characters are, and not because the filmmakers are trying to earn PC brownie points. It won't be the same going forward, one character says late in the film, and that's certainly true. But to judge from the evidence here, even a Walkerless Team Furious still has plenty of gas left in the tank. Also joining the cast for this latest outing, Thai martial arts superstar Tony Jaa, female UFC champ Ronda Rousey, and, in a blink and you miss her cameo, Iggy Azalea. The film's full on-screen title reads Furious 7, although all posters and marketing materials bear the numeral 7. The presence of 2 credited cinematographers and 4 credited editors offers further evidence that the interrupted production took many hands on deck to properly salvage. For now, there is Walker, and it is a constant pleasure to watch the excitingly physical actor. He was once again hurl himself into the movie's complicated stunt sequences like a human cannonball. Although Walker could never have known this would be his final performance, it may be the ultimate compliment to say that he plays each moment as though it were his last. And when the time does come for his Brian O'Connor to bid adieu, the movie arranges it in a way that feels fully earned and well within the boundaries of good taste. Directed by James Kwan, written by Chris Morgan, based on characters by Gary Scott Thompson, produced by Neal H. Moritz, Vin Diesel, Michael Fottrell starring Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, Dwayne Johnson, Michelle Rodriguez, Tyers, Gibson, Chris, Ludacris, Bridges, Jordana Brewster, Jim and Hansu, Kurt Russell, Jason Statham. Cinematography, Stephen F. Winden, Mark Spicer, edited by Christian Wagner, Dylan, Haithkirk, Maury Lee, Folsom Boyd, music by Brian Tyler Production Company's MRC Original Film, One Race Films, China Film, Company Limited, distributed by Universal Pictures, release dates April 1st, 2015 in TCL Chinese Theater, April 3rd, 2015 in United States, running time 137 minutes. Countries, United States, China language, English budget, 190 million box office, 1.515 billion. So guys, this is the review of Fast and Furious 7 movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please